idiots doing?
Moving on to A tier, we have the sub at the bottom of A tier. Was really torn on whether to put this on A or B tier. The sub is basically the best decamo option in the game at the moment in terms of consistency. And of course not the Alchemist sub, I don't know where that came from, the Reactor sub is one of the best ways to deal with group balloons in general, and obviously pops leads as well. That's already enough to make it at least a B tier, because those two upgrades are extremely relevant right now. But then, I think it just barely makes it to A tier, because I do think it scales decently into the late game. Mostly because of First Strike. First Strike is still, despite the cooldown, a very good ability that can be used to counter bads when, well, obviously right now we're very concerned about bads. The bottom path, surprisingly, hasn't really worked out so much. I mean, I say surprisingly, I kind of had a feeling this would happen, but it still surprises me to this day. I was really surprised to see how bad Airburst Darts is in Battles 1. I thought it would be much better than it was, considering how amazing it is in in BTD 6. But, yep, it carried over, and in fact it's even worse in BTD Battles 2. Airburst is pathetic in this game as early game defense, which is so weird to see considering how crazy good it is in normal Bloons Tower defense. And that makes it very hard to scale into the late game using the bottom path, even though the bottom path is good mob damage, very well rounded, and of course if you can get the 5th tier sub commander, can buff the rest of your subs around the map. Energizer, as well as that, the other 5th tier on the top path, has some potential to be quite powerful as well, to increase the XP you earn with heroes. For now, I think that's kind of irrelevant, because all the heroes that we have kind of get high level enough by the time you need them to be high level anyway. But once we start getting heroes that level up a bit slower and have especially important high level abilities, Energizer might be a surprisingly common tower to see in future. But for now, the heroes we have just don't need to be leveled up. Quincy, Striker Jones, unless you're going for the level 20 ability, Striker Jones doesn't really need the leveling. Oben will reach level 20 anyway. Gwendolyn, well, they won't reach level 20 per se, but they will get very high level, and most of their last few upgrades, while nice to have, aren't important. You don't need them. So, yeah, looking at it like that, it feels like Energizer has some very high potential utility, but we're just not going to see it utilized until later. Maybe the ability to make water-based abilities happen much more commonly will be useful. If it turns out that First Strike spam is a viable strategy, combining that with Energizer could be very, very effective. But I don't know. While I do think First Strike is going to be a good upgrade, I'm not sure about spamming First Strikes being good. That sounds like it probably ain't going to work. I think they'll just hit a point where you can't just have like enough money to just spam them and it's a good defense.
I can hardly believe I even forgot to mention the most important thing that you can do with Energizer, although I still think that I'm not sure if it carries it to a higher tier. Obviously, as well as significantly reducing the cooldown of water-based monkeys, it does reduce the cooldown of all other abilities by 20%. Now this is nice to have, but unless you're in ultra late game and you have some super powerful abilities, only 20% isn't worth it that often. However, obviously, money-making abilities are super meta right now, and a 20% boost to all money-making abilities on the screen, that is probably going to be pretty significant. I'm honestly surprised I haven't seen anyone using Energizer, because I feel like it's got to be a good combo with sniper supply drops. That being said, I don't know if it's necessary. It's definitely nice to have that cash boost, but by the time you have an Energizer, you're probably already making enough money. So while it's nice to have the cash, it'd probably be better spent on something that you can actually use as a serious late game defense. So then it's a question of finding abilities that actually really care about having even just a 20% reduction to their ability time that will be really effective in the ultra late game. I don't think that's impossible, but I think it's not going to be very common, which of course is why this is at the bottom of A.
So yeah, the last thing is Preemptive Strike. If Preemptive Strike was good, I could see sub getting nudged up, like maybe here, but it's not. I remember Preemptive Strike being an underwhelming upgrade, but it was one of those upgrades I hadn't used in a really long time. So I did recently go back to BTD 6 and have a chimps run where I tried to use Preemptive Strike. It was pathetic. It was even worse than I remembered. So, I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it does increase the damage of the first strike ability, so it might be used just for that, maybe, every now and then. But other than that, I think Preemptive Strike is going to be a near unused tower. I think the basically sub is going to exist for Reactor sub, maybe Sub Commander if you're running a lot of subs in the late game, and First Strike. And I think that's basically where its usage is going to end. It's really like on the line between A and B tier, because it technically has late game, but its late game is Sub Commander and First Strike, which really isn't ideal. But it does have some really good early game, and it is a good support tower. Anyway, then there's Boomerang Monkey. I'm going to be honest, I really didn't want to put it this high, because I'm actually not a fan of Boomerang. Well, I think Boomerangs are fun, but even in BTD 6, I think Boomerangs are very overrated. However, they are serving a very important role at the moment. I think in terms of just like sheer power, they are being overrated right now. And I think that they're being used more than they probably should be, just because they are, you know, convenient for like low tier players, because Glaive Ricochet just deals with like the mid-early game so easily. But I think the issue with Boomerang is, well, you've heard people say this before, it's got bad late game. Moab Domination is an awful 5th tier. The Permacharge is decent but overpriced and underwhelming, and Glaive Lord is like okay but not enough to carry it. And that's essentially your late. Those are essentially your late game options with Boomerang Monkey. So that would make me say, oh yeah, Boomerang's bad. Don't get Boomerang. It's a bad tower. But the problem is, Boomerang is very good at one thing: making the mid game absolutely pathetically easy. And that usually is something that I would say is overkill. Like, oh, you don't need this much mid-game defense. You don't need a Morg Glaives with red hot rangs and a like Moab press with faster throwing. You don't need that. And that's like that's spending more money than you need to, and you should just get a more cost-efficient defense that's better against other things and also doesn't need camera detection and all that. But the problem is, right now, the game's a little broken if you didn't realise, and well, I'm gonna cut it out so you can only see so you don't see S tier, but I actually have a tier above S in this tier list right now, called Broken. Now I don't usually do this, I think S should be the top of just about every tier list, but right now, these two towers you see in Broken tier are genuinely bugged, and their bugs allow them to be way more powerful than ever intended, and they are genuinely beyond S tier in terms of power. You probably already knew that was the case for Dartling, maybe not for Ninja, we'll get to that later, but yeah, these two towers are stupid good, and Dartling is one of them. Now, one of the only weaknesses of Dartling, and I really do mean not only weaknesses, it can pop lead, it can pop camo, it can pop any kind amount of group balloons unless it's fortified ceramics, and even then it can deal with them with a boost. It can deal with group mobs if you get a rocket storm up, and it can deal with bad if you get it to a mad. It's stupid how powerful it is. It's literally weak to nothing. Except, it is weak to an early fortified Moab rush, because usually by that point the opponent doesn't have enough money to get a rocket storm up. Oops! And if they do, you can then just send more fortified Moabs while it's on cooldown, and they will either have to sell and rebuy it to get another rocket storm, or they will have to die, or use a boost, or something like that. That is essentially the only way that you can kill Dartling, and it's in the mid game. So, yeah, that is why Boomerangs have to go in A tier. Quite honestly, I don't think they're genuinely this powerful, but at the end of the day, if the best strategy in the game has its only weakness covered extremely well by this tower, then that makes it extremely relevant, whether I like it or not. So I have to at least put it in A tier, even though I think that Boomerangs in general just straight up power, and once we're out of this meta and in future, they're going to get a lot worse. Then there's Engineer. I feel like there's a lot of places I could put Engineer. I could put Engineer anywhere from B to S. It's really, really powerful, but very hard to measure, because it can. If your opponent takes no counterplay, then Engineer is an easy S tier. But there's a lot of counterplay you can take against Engineers, and it's kind of hard to measure how much that counterplay affects its usefulness. It's kind of weird to see the Engineer so high, but I guess this is what happens when you actually make Balloon Trap a good upgrade. So yes, Balloon Trap is the main reason Engineer is this high. You shouldn't realise why, because Balloon Trap is usually pretty bad in BTD 6. In BTD 6, of course, you earn money for popping balloons. In BTD battles, you don't, but you still earn money from traps. And traps already give you double money compared to the amount of balloons in them. So essentially, you're now getting money from popping balloons, and you're getting double money from popping balloons if you have a balloon trap down, which gives you much better income than your opponent, and is really good for being able to be aggressive, counter your opponent's eco, and hit them with a really strong rush early on. The thing is, if the opponent realizes, oh, they're going for a trap, there's a couple things they can do. First of all, of course, the normal balloons you get sent in normal rounds in Battles 2 are pathetic, and so you usually want to put the trap down in front of whichever lane has the opponent sends. If the opponent sees you have a trap, and they have a strategy where they can make money without having to eco, they can then stop ecoing and just not send any more, and your trap just sits there, never getting used. Now, you can kind of trick your opponent here. What you can do is you can sell your balloon trap and just leave the trap there, and what will happen is your opponents then start sending you balloons. First of all, the trap is still there, so you will make money from that trap, but second of all, you can then obviously rebuy the balloon trap and catch them off guard. That being said, though, even though that is generally worth it, since you get 700 cash per trap that gets filled, and that 700 probably pays for the money you lost by selling and rebuying it, it's still not a great strategy, because then you just go around in circles, don't you? Then your opponent stops sending again, and then you sell the balloon trap again, and then they start sending again, and it's not the best way to go about things. And as well as that, they don't even necessarily have to stop sending. What a lot of people will do, which is definitely the smarter option, is if it's not late enough into the game yet, instead they will start to send reds. They're still going to get eco. In fact, in terms of the amount of money spent to the amount of money earned, reds are literally the most efficient eco in the game. The only reason they're not good is because they're slow. So even though they are very efficient, it takes a long time for them to build up a good eco. So the opponent can just send reds, and their eco slows down a bit, but they're still paying very little for a good amount of income increase, and because reds are much less RBE, one, your engineer might even be popping the reds before they can reach the trap, and two, even if they aren't, it's not going to fill the trap up very quickly. It's going to take a long time for it to fill up now. So yeah, there's a lot of counterplay to trap, which is the only reason I'm hesitant to put engineering higher. But if the opponent has no counterplay, trap is amazing money making that counters a lot of the meta strategies really, really well, because most meta strategies, of course, use eco. The only real meta thing that doesn't use eco is snipers, but even then, when played at their best, snipers use eco alongside their own abilities to make money. I think the engineer is really powerful for that, and as well as that, has more utility outside of that, because they of course have overclock, which is one of the best abilities in the game. They have cleansing foam, which is usually an absolutely pathetic decamo option, but in a game where decamo options are so insanely important, I think the cleansing foam actually is useful. As well as that, I don't know if this is a recent change or something, but in Battles 2, the cleansing foam always targets the closest part of the map. It's not random anymore. It will always place it all at whichever part of the track is closest to the engineer. So you don't have to worry about the cleansing foam just missing. So it's a decent decamo option. As I say, overclock is one of the best abilities in the game when paired with a especially powerful tower. And the last thing is top path. Might actually be good. Now, you'd be surprised to hear that, but Sentry Expert has been buffed quite a few times, and you might be like, oh yeah, but it's still bad. But here's the thing, it's bad in BTD 6 because most of its buffs is just that it's more Pierce. And of course in BTD 6, there's not that many situations where a tower that already costs that much just wants more Pierce. But in Battles 2, where you're constantly sent group balloons, you often get rushed with group balloons, Sentry Expert looks like it might actually be very able to deal with pretty heavy clumped rushes of balloons, considering every single one of its smart sentries has like 20 to 30 to 40 Pierce in terms of how many balloons it can hit with one shot. So yeah, it's quite powerful. But then as well as that, more importantly, there is Sentry Champion, as it's called now. Now this is a 5th tier that's been buffed quite a few times, because it used to be very underwhelming, and even still, it's not one of the best 5th tiers in the game, but it's certainly usable. But how can you make it much more than usable? Well, if you didn't realise, the attack speed of the engineer also determines how fast it places down its sentries. If you overclock a Sentry Champion, it will place twice as many sentries. This makes it temporarily some of the most high DPS you can get on a single tower out of all the towers in the game, because even though it's not as powerful as some other 5th tiers, when you overclock it, it's not getting double firepower, it's getting quadruple firepower. It's getting double the sentries, and the sentries are attacking at double speed, which is insanely powerful. Now, this on its own in BTD 6 is niche in its usage, because although it is very powerful, it has a bit of a problem. That being that you have to wait for it to build the sentries before it gets to its super powerful moment where it peaks. And then on top of that, you kind of have to do it like, it's obviously temporary because it's based on the overclock ability, and you have to do it in advance, which makes it so that in BTD 6 it's not very useful. However, in battles, where you're probably aware that when your opponent's going to send you a fortified bad, you're going to have enough time to set it all up. I think it's going to be much more relevant to set up a Sentry Champion with overclock. Now, I'm not saying that Sentry Champions are going to be the best overclock target in the game. There's probably going to be other things more worth it. But what I'm saying is, no matter what loadout you're running Engineer in, you can use that combo if you have those upgrades unlocked. No matter which loadout you're using, you can use Engineer with that. And I've mentioned, I think that's much more relevant in Battles too. Having towers that can do multiple things. Even if it's probably not the best option in the entire game, being able to actually have late game just general defense with Engineer, a tower which generally seems more interested in support than actual defense, is going to be relevant, I reckon. As well as that, XXL Trap. Not a 5th tier I'm generally a fan of, but with how much stronger Balloon Trap is in BTD battles, I reckon XXL Trap could be a real thing. Especially because at the moment, of course, not many people would have it unlocked. If you have it unlocked, I imagine you could get a lot of people caught off guard by having them send you like a ZOMG rush. And then you just suddenly upgrade to XXL Trap, suck up all their ZOMGs, and get all that sweet cash for it. That seems like a massive play that could be really, really powerful. But just in general, technically XXL Trap is very, very good at dealing with massive amounts of balloons. It's just, I generally don't like it because it's a super expensive 5th tier that generally doesn't pay back for itself with its income in BTD 6 and can only deal with Zongs and below, which means that it can deal with basically everything, but again, no bad damage. In battles, I think this is going to be more effective though, because I think that 1, you are going to make your money back from your trap, considering that traps make way more money in battles, and 2, I think it's going to be a very good counter for a lot of rushes, like a surprise thing to pull out. But 3 as well, I think that the fact it's not bad against bads isn't even going to be that bad. There's a lot of bads in one sentence. Because you could sell it. And I actually think it is fine to sell it. Again, the trap will be left behind. By the time your opponent's sending bads, it's probably the very end of the game. And it doesn't matter if you won't get another trap in its place once that trap's full now you've sold it. You can just leave that trap there, get about 60k in money by selling it, and then use that 60k to buy whatever you need to defeat the bad, whether that's a mad or whatever. So yeah, I think that XXL Trap even has a lot of potential. The only thing I'll say is Ultra Boost. Ultra Boost I don't have faith in. And it's a shame because I think that a lot of usually super overpriced, way too expensive to be good upgrades in BTD 6 are a lot more actually usable in battles, considering that, you know, you earn more money in this game and you go late game quite a lot, but I don't think Ultra Boost is one of them. It's very, very expensive, and I think it could have been salvaged if the buff was something you could apply super quick. But the problem is, you don't get the benefit of Ultra Boost very quickly. You need to use the ability 10 times to really get the maximum benefit of Ultra Boost on just one tower. Now, if this upgrade wasn't so expensive, that wouldn't be a problem. Or if this upgrade could get that buff up to 10 times quickly, that wouldn't be a problem. But considering we have both of these problems, that it can't get the buff up quickly, and the tower itself is so ridiculously expensive, you won't be able to get it until the super late game. I feel like by the time Ultra Boost is actually paying off, you've already died 5 rounds ago. So, yeah, I don't see Ultra Boost working. But other than that, just about every single upgrade in the Engineer's arsenal seems decent, actually, at just soloing, and then any other towers can step in and fill in its weaknesses. And even just one last thing I'll say is that even though it's not the best option in the game, if you're trying to level up Engineers, I highly recommend trying to use 220 Engineers as your Moab damage. Deconstruction was buffed quite a while ago, so that it actually works with your sentries now. So every single sentry will be dealing 2 damage to Moabs instead of 1, which might not sound like much, but considering how many of them you can get, and you can get quite a few attacking pretty fast, it's not bad Moab damage. Of course, it's not good, but it's better than you might expect considering you're using a 220 Engineer. That's my recommendation if you're trying to get Engineers up anyway. And then finally for A tier, the Tack Shooter. So, bit of a weird spot right now. A lot of people aren't really using Tack now, and it makes sense. It was stupid broken on release day, and then it got nerfed, and then people didn't use it anymore. Now, does that mean it's bad? No, I would say right now it is balanced good, and that's about it. So why is it at the top of A tier? Well, to be fair, A tier is balanced good, but it is at the very top. It's almost getting into that bit where it'd be overpowered. Why is it so strong? Well, there's a few things it has going for it. First of all, middle path. Blade Shooter with faster shooting is probably the most cost-efficient defense, early game defense in the game. It is extremely reliable, and even against Space Whites in a good spot, it can deal with it. And that means that essentially until round 7, you do not need to get any more upgrades for it, which means you get a lot of money you can just chuck into eco and getting ahead of your opponent in terms of money gain. And as well as that, even when round 7 comes, it doesn't really need much of a boost to get through grouped yellows. In fact, temporarily, if your opponent is sending constant group yellows, if they're only sending you a little small, short burst of them, just drop a Gwendolyn cocktail or drop something like Oben, like just your hero ability in general. Just whichever hero it is, use your ability and it'll probably get you through it. You won't even have to buy the upgrade. So yeah, it's got that going for it, which is already, that's really powerful. I've already mentioned a lot of these towers that are on the lower ranks, a lot of these loadouts that don't work. It's not even necessarily that they wouldn't work in the late game or anything, or that they don't have synergy, it's just they can't get through the early game. It's just as soon as Space Whites come on round 5, it's too much for them. And this tower deals with early game so well for such a cheap price that I think that it helps you build up your game, build up your money early in the game really, really effectively. But then you get Blade Maelstrom, which for only a couple thousand more gives you an ability which basically nukes the screen of any balloons that aren't Moabs, and even then, when close enough, can deal massive damage to Moabs. So yeah, Blade Maelstrom, stupid powerful, and able to be activated instantly the moment you buy it. Why isn't it just broken? The only reason it isn't broken is because it can't hit camos, and obviously your opponent's just going to send camos, but if you're running it with Village, then it can hit camos, which, yeah, if it couldn't hit camos at all, then obviously I'd probably put it in like B or something like that, but considering you can just decamo or use a Village, I think that instantly makes Blade Maelstrom way more valid as a super powerful drop it down and save you ability for a cheap price. But then that's still not it, because you got the bottom path, which is the best path in general. If you haven't already seen, you probably have, Overdrive Tack Shooter with faster shooting is some of the most cheap, cost-effective Moab damage in the game. It is really powerful, it takes outbuffs really well, and of course, most importantly, it synergizes very well with debuffs from Cripple Moab and Super Brittle, which is very relevant against the bad, especially when you get it to Attack Zone. Attack Zone, Super Brittle is some of the best bad damage in the game, and both of which are actually very cheap and affordable 5th tiers. Together, they are quite expensive, they're just about just under 60k, but individually, they're not so bad, they're like 20k and 30k, which means that you can buy one of them earlier so that you're not screwed while saving up money for the other one, and you will get enough to get both of them in time, considering you can buy a Mad in time almost every single game for around 30, and a Mad costs 60,000, and as I say, these things cost just under 60,000 to get both, and that combo will melt the bad layer. It is amazing at destroying bads. So that, I think, makes Tack extremely relevant, considering it's some of the best bad damage in the game, in a game where bad damage is super important because every game at high ranks goes to bads. Yeah, I think that's huge. So Tack's very, very, very good, but then I haven't even mentioned the top path. Now the top path is definitely the least useful. You essentially just use it to pop leads if you really need to, but then it does have something going for it, and that is Inferno Ring. Now generally, I consider Inferno Ring to be a pretty bad 5th tier. Well, not even bad, just outclassed. It's just over 50,000, it can't pop purples, it's good against group balloons and group Moabs, but there are better options. It seems like a bad tower at first, but I actually expect it will do a lot better in battles too. The reason for this is, again, the limited tower loadout. It's mostly just outclassed. It's not even technically a bad tower, it does a lot of damage, and especially with primary training to make the Meteor double hit, it is very powerful. It's just a question of, is it the best? Usually you'll have other options. Usually it would just be like, oh, but I could just get like a Sun Avatar or whatever. Oh, you know, I could just get like a Tack Zone and that's cheaper and all that. There's better options a lot of the time, but now that you can only pick 3 towers, and if you get into the late game and you have all this money left over, you've got your Super Brittle, you've got your Tack Zone, but you still have money, Inferno Ring would be a decent thing to buy at that point. And also, again, even though it's not the best bad damage in the game, it's respectable bad damage. So, I think combined with everything else, it would be a real option to actually take on bads. I think the Tacks have almost no weakness, essentially, except for the fact that they need the support of a Village. It's almost impossible to run Tacks without Village. And that's the only thing that holds them back from S tier, is that you really need to run Village with Tacks. You almost don't have the option to try anything else. You can use decamos, but then you worry about leads, unless you use an Alchemist buff, but then Alchemist buffs, how reliable are they? you get the problem. It's an issue. But I think that for their unprecedented bad damage and their amazing power to deal super well in the early game and the late game, and when first mobs come, I think that they deserve high A tier. Which finally brings us to S tier. Oh boy. So, you could probably see this coming. I've been mentioning Super Brittle a lot. Ice Tower in S tier. I'm not insane. I'm putting it at the bottom of S tier. But I will say, Ice Tower, S tier. I'm standing by it. I think that Ice Tower is amazing in this game. I haven't even unlocked Icicle Impale yet, which I think is the best Ice Tower upgrade in the game. I'm getting close to it. And I can tell you, Super Brittle has been amazing. Super Brittle has actually done better than Dartling Ninja Sniper in the late game sometimes when I've had games. Now, it could just be a skill thing. It could be that I was just playing better than the opponent. But I have genuinely defended better with Ice Mortar Sniper sometimes than like actual Dartling players using Mads and stuff like that. Mostly thanks to Super Brittle. Super Brittle provides insane amounts of extra damage. If you don't realise what it does, well, I think I've already explained, but I'll just be thorough in case I haven't earlier in this video. Essentially, when you get Embrittlement, the 4th tier upgrade, it allows the Ice Tower to freeze Moabs. Now, it doesn't actually slow the Moab or give it the frozen property, but when it freezes them, they take +1 damage from all targets, like everything that hits it. And while you might be like, oh, it's only +1 damage, if you use that with a Super Monkeys only deal 1 damage. Every single one of those hits is now dealing 2 damage. That's double damage. That's double damage. That is a big improvement. And a lot of people massively underrate Super Brittle. I've had so many games where, like, I think probably one of my favourites was when I was trying out Druid Ice Alchemist. There was one game of Sands of Time where I had an Embrittlement down, and I just had... Basically, I was greeting with Jungle's Bounties. I had quite a few of those druids. And then I had 4 Heart of Vengeance druids. But that's really all I had, except the Oban for my defense. And he thought that I was being way too greedy and that I wouldn't be able to take on a Moab. That Moab gets to the center, Embrittlement hits it. Not even Druid of Wrath. Literally 002 druids and Jungle's Bounty druids. That's all I had. Melted it. It was a fortified Moab on round 18. Just deletes it. And this guy didn't seem to get the message, so then on round 20 he tries grouped BFBs that are fortified with fortified mobs layered underneath. And I upgrade my Druid of, Heart of Vengeance druids to Druid of Wrath druids, and I boost, and I basically don't buy anything else, and it melts it. Embrittlement is insane for the amount of damage it can increase, as long as you actually run towers with it that get the benefit, that abuse it and take it to its limit. And then Super Brittle takes that and multiplies it by 4, by giving +4 damage. This makes it some of the best bad damage in the game, which is extremely relevant right now. As well as able to decamo, that's relevant. As well as able to hit leads, that's relevant. As well as Ice Shards, the 3rd tier upgrade, being amazing at destroying regrow rushes, because the more balloons there are, the more Ice Shards there are. So it doesn't matter how many regrow rainbows they send at you, one Ice Shards explosion will destroy it and delete them all. Again, I already said this in one of my previous videos, but on In the Wall, I once got rushed with a constant all-in regrow zebra rush.
I meant regrow rainbow.
With nothing but a single 310 ice and a reactor sub. And you would think I was screwed. I did not even boost. I just sat there and emoted my opponent as Ice Shards exploded and destroyed all of his regrow rainbows. And he kept sending. He was sure they would get overwhelmed at some point, but no, they got destroyed. Because Ice Shards is super powerful in battles. Not normally in just normal BTD 6, but when your opponent sends super tightly clumped balloons that are regrow, Ice Shards deletes them. It just says, I don't care about your rush. Shing, I just spent about 2,000 to defend a million regrow rainbows. I don't care. So yeah, if you can't tell, I'm quite a fan of Ice. But that's not even the end of it. So, refreeze. If you don't know what refreeze is, because some people out there probably genuinely don't, because they don't use ice at all, refreeze is the 2nd upgrade on the bottom path, and it makes it so that you can freeze a balloon that's already frozen to reset its freeze timer and damage it while it's frozen. Sounds pretty good, but then it can't work forever, can it? It can't infinitely stun lock balloons, right? It just has to unfreeze before it's able to freeze it again. That's got to be a bit of a niche upgrade. Well, all you have to do is cross-path refreeze with enhanced freeze to increase the Ice's attack speed, and yes, it actually does infinitely stun lock balloons. Not Moabs, of course, it can't freeze Moabs, but anything that's not a Moab, infinitely stun locked. Which, that's pretty powerful. The only reason it's not busted OP is because it can't do it to whites or zebras, because of course they're freeze immune, unless you get an MIB, but then that's a lot of money to spend. But then, this is where it gets good. Fortified and Super Ceramics, they take a lot of freezes to break, so you can near infinitely stall Fortified Ceramics with refreeze. Already, I think that's enough to make it worthwhile, considering you're only paying like 500 for the Ice Tower, another 300 for a refreeze, and then like another 200 for enhanced freeze. It's about 1,000 to instantly just perma-stun lock massive groups of Fortified Ceramics. Amazing. But then, it gets even better when you take the middle path, Arctic Wind, which slows down all balloons in its range, and at this point it essentially won't miss a single balloon. Putting an Arctic Wind at the exit is an amazing way to basically guarantee that no balloon will ever get through your defense. You won't ever have a situation of, oh no, the Moab, I managed to pop it, but then all the ceramics just snuck right through before I could react. No, Arctic Wind will catch every single one of them and keep them stun locked until you can deal with them. And of course you compare the Arctic Wind with an Ice Shards to not even have to worry about dealing with them by having them just all die in an explosion of Ice Shards. Amazing. And not that expensive as well. And then you can also buy Snowstorm to increase the range of the Arctic Wind to be extra safe, and get an ability that can freeze everything on the screen, including Moabs temporarily, to buy yourself time and stall, which is super important in battles because you both rush each other at the same time, but you stall, obviously then you win because your opponent dies first. There's just so much utility in Ice, and that's not even getting to its best upgrade yet. Icicle Impale. Oh boy. I'm glad to see that it's slowly starting to be really recognised for how good it is, but I think Icicle Impale is genuinely probably the best upgrade in Bloons Tower Defense 6, and I think it's still going to be the best upgrade in, well, maybe not the best, but up there in Battles 2. Icicle Impale, the 5th tier on the bottom path, allows the ice to shoot icicles at Moabs that deal a decent amount of damage to them. I thought it was 25, but apparently it's been buffed to 50, which, sure, I'll take that. But the damage isn't what you care about. What you care about is it actually freezes Moabs. All Moabs except the bad. All of them. Even DDTs. Now when I say freeze, yes, they don't stop in place, I'll admit that. However, it's not just, oh, they're a bit slower, like with Moab Glue. No, Moab Glue, if I remember right, slows by 37.5%. Most slows in the game slow by a certain percentage. Icicle Impale is unique. Icicle Impale does not slow the balloons down by a percentage, it sets them to a set speed. It sets them to the speed of a Zong, and if it is a Zong, it sets them to half the speed of a Zong. So, that means you can slow DDTs down to the speed of a Zong with Icicle Impale. You know, the balloons that rush through your defense at pink balloon speed, you can just set them to Zong balloon speed. I think that's huge. Considering this tower is able to stall DDTs, the best DDT stall in the game, probably, actually. The best DDT stall in the game. I mean, Super Glue is maybe better, but Super Glue, I think, is a little bit more prone to miss, and also Super Glue is more expensive. So yeah, Icicle Impale, the best DDT counter in the entire game. Also great at countering groups of Moabs because the Icicle Explosions hit multiple of them, freezing and damaging multiple of them at once, while keeping them all stuck in one place where you can just absolutely wail on them. It does amazing against everything except the bad. And that's the one thing that made me think maybe it's not the best. But considering you have Super Brittle, probably the best upgrade against the bad in the entire game, on the same tower, I think the fact that it doesn't deal with the bad as easily as other towers doesn't make it bad. I think it's actually still a completely fine tower regardless of that. I think it's still really, really good. So yeah, if you can't tell, I think Ice is a good tower. I think that it's massively underrated in this game, but I completely understand why, because its big, amazing upgrades are almost all 4th and 5th tiers. But if you can put the, and also, upgrading Ice when you have no upgrades unlocked is awful. But if you can get past that, if you can soldier past that, you will have an amazing tower in your loadout. Ice is amazing in this game, but you have to put in a lot of effort to make it work. It even works in the early game as long as you get something to do with whites on round 5, but obviously that's a little bit rough. All that said, got on a bit of a tangent there. Spike Factory. It almost feels a bit underwhelming to talk about Spike Factory now after we just talked about Ice, and I said so many positive things about Ice, and I'm only going to say a few positive things about Spike Factory. It might even sound like it doesn't belong in S, but I have to admit, the few positive things I'm about to say are so relevant that this tower does still deserve S, as much as I kind of have a softer spot for ice. And it still probably ranks higher than ice because the few things it does have are extremely relevant. So first of all, spiked balls. Generally seen as an okay upgrade until it got buffed in BTD 6 by a frankly insane amount, and now it's some of the best just pure DPS, especially against Moabs and ceramics, of course, because it's specialized against ceramics in the game. It's really cheap considering how much damage it does. You can spam it and it will deal with Moabs and fortified Moabs really, really easily, which is very, very important because that is the main weakness of the Dartling. So, similar situation to the Boomerang Monkey, where it covers the Dartling's weaknesses, only kind of even better, because not only does it cover the Dartling's weaknesses, but it's also actually one of the best towers in the late game, whereas the Boomerang Monkey drops off in the late game. This tower is amazing in the late game because of Moab Shredder Spikes, which is probably the best single target Moab DPS in the game, combined with Spike Storm being an ability that allows you to instantly get the Moab damage you need if you don't have the amount that you need right now to live. And that also synergizes with boosts to increase the amount of spikes on the screen because the attack speed of the Spike Factory affects how many spikes Spike Storm produces. So, yeah, Spike Storm, Carpet of Spikes, all that kind of stuff, all the middle path upgrades make it amazing at melting bads, which is of course really important and relevant right now. It's kind of insane that despite how stupid strong Permaspike is, the bottom path Spike Factory is currently the only one that's not seeing any use. I think it is actually good. I think just no one's using it because they have to invest a lot of XP to actually unlock Permaspike, and, you know, they already know that the middle path is more important to get to deal with bads. But yeah, there's not much to say about Spike Factory. It's just simply I have to put it this high, considering it is probably the most effective bad damage in the game, while also covering the weaknesses of the strongest tower in the game currently. As much as I feel like in objective factors, it probably ranks a little bit lower than Ice. Again, in the current meta, I think it fills a more important role than Ice, just by a little margin. And then finally at the top of S, Snipers. I told you guys so many times, Middle Path Sniper is overpowered, it's super good, you should use it, before Battles 2 came out. And it took you until Battles 2 to notice, but yes, Middle Path Bouncing Bullet Sniper, especially with Alchemist buff, is insanely powerful, and only got more powerful in battles now that the income from supply drop is genuinely amazing. Supply drop income, I think, is the best income in the game besides just full-on eco, and obviously you can do it at the same time as ecoing. And obviously, unlike ecoing, you don't lose income from sending bads if your income is supply drop snipers. Not to mention, the final upgrade for the middle path on Sniper, Elite Sniper, permanently globally buffs the attack speed of all your snipers by 33%, which is amazing with the stun on main Moab to increase the amount you can stun lock balloons, but also you're going to be spamming the snipers anyway because you want multiple supply drops, and also you don't have many towers that you can bring. Snipers are one of the only few you have, so you're going to spam it anyway. So Elite Sniper has amazing synergy. He not only provides amazing just group balloon damage, which is usually the weakness of the sniper, he can not only pop lead, he can not only pop camo, but then on top of that, he's able to provide some of the best income in the game while permanently buffing all the other snipers on the entire screen with no limit, with increased attack speed, while they're just firing away, giving you even more money on top of that. This is an amazing tower. And I'm not even mad that Sniper's this good, because at the very least this one isn't so good because it's literally bugged. It's just this good. And I love to see it because I'm a big Sniper fan. Now that being said, obviously I do think it deserves a nerf, but I hope it doesn't get nerfed too hard. I hope it's still a good tower afterwards. But yeah, it's kind of insane that the bottom path is the path no one's using right now, considering that bottom path is still extremely cost efficient, just pure DPS for dealing with Moabs. But it's just not simply as good as the middle path's insane income, camo popping, and on top of that, attack speed buffing all in one. But on top of that, you obviously have the top path, which I mentioned. Main Moab is an amazing stun, it's a good DDT counter, and you even have Cripple Moab, which, similarly to Icicle Impale, increases the damage that Moabs take while also increasing the stun duration, making it great against bads. Even though it's only +2 compared to Super Brittle's +4, +2 damage from everything that hits it is still super important, and of course the bullet itself still deals massive damage. Sniper is the best tower in the game that isn't bugged. But there's two more towers that haven't been mentioned yet, and I think a lot of you know what they are.